The name of the movie is Death Sentence. A criminal gang kills his son before his eyes. He turns from an office worker into a gang killer. Nick has been living a quiet and happy life with his wife and two sons, Lucas and Brendan. Brendan's eldest son was considered a spoiled brat. He loved hockey, won the league, and was happy with his family. One day when they were returning from a hockey game involving Brendan, the eldest son suggested that he go to Canada to become a professional game, and put the idea to his father inside the car, and on their way home, he noticed two cars wandering around a store on the way. Suddenly, the car ran out of fuel. He had to stop in front of the gas station. The son felt hungry, so he entered the store and Nick stayed in the car. The son entered to buy food, and a gang entered to rob the store and killed him in a sad scene. The father did not believe it and turned towards his son, and was able to see the killer's face. The father tried hard to save his son and rushed him to the hospital, but in the end the son died. The father filed a case against a criminal, and during the trial, he withdrew the invitation, and then decided to take revenge himself, because the lawyer had said that the criminal would not be tried for murder, and he would be tried for 3 years, only because the gas station does not contain cameras. In addition, there was no witness to the accident. The court released the murderer Joe. And Nick watched the gang. He took a knife from the house, and went to the place where Joe was hiding. After a long fight, Nick managed to kill Joe. He ran out of the place after taking the knife he used to kill Joe, and threw it into the sea. He was able to overcome everything that happened and continue his life normally, but the gang began to investigate the murder of Joe, where Joe was the brother of the gang boss Billy. That is why he himself began to search for the killer. At first he asked the girl who was with Joe that day. She said that there was an unfamiliar person in a suit walking around the place, and after thinking and discussion among the gang members, they did not find anyone they knew. But despite this, Billy became suspicious of Nick, so he took a picture of him that was printed on the newspaper and showed it to Joe's friend, who assured him that he was the one who was hovering around the place. So the conflict between the gang and Nick began. Detective Lawrence visits Nick at his workplace. She told him that Joe was killed by another gang, but suddenly the detective noticed a wound in Nick's hand, and this, of course, was due to his quarrel with Joe before he killed him. Nick sat down and began to think that the gang would discover his identity because of the injury. Indeed, the guess was correct. As soon as he left his workplace, he was surprised by the presence of a member of the gang watching him, while the others were hiding in separate places. The man took out the gun, and before he shot Nick, he quickly turned around and hit him with a bag he was carrying and ran away between the alleys. But how would he escape from a large group of people when he was alone? He entered a parking garage, but was hit by a car that sounded the alarm. He tried to fix his mistake and hit the rest of the cars to set off a huge number of alarm bells. He repeated this throughout the building, and this act distracted the gang's focus, but one of the gang came out through the back door. And he ran into Nick, tried to get rid of him, and after a violent quarrel, he put him in the car and pushed it from the top of the building, and thus another member of the gang died. As for Nick, he got into another car and was able to successfully escape from the rest of the gang. The police arrived late at the scene, and they took all the evidence. Unfortunately for Nick, he had dropped his wallet on the ground, and this wallet did not fall into the hands of the police, but fell into the hands of Billy, the head of the gang, who sent a man to Nick's workplace to hand him a large box in front of his colleagues. In this box was a picture of Nick's family, and he threatens him, and also a phone number was on the back of the picture. The face of his wife and young son was also covered in blood, much to Nick's horror. He called and was terrified. Billy answered him very coldly and said that he would kill his family first before killing him. After that, he called the investigator and told her what happened. As for him, he ran out to the house after asking the investigator to go to the house also with the police. When he got home, he found the police there and found his wife and son fine. The investigator tried to inquire from him about exactly what he had done and why the gang decided to take revenge on him in order to be able to help him, but he did not tell her anything, and despite that, the investigator left police officers to protect his house. He could not sleep because of his fear for his family and remained sitting on the steps of the house until he heard the car alarm and looked out the window to discover that the policeman had been killed. The gang entered the house and killed his wife and young son, but he survived the accident after entering a long coma. When he woke up, he saw the investigator, and he told her that he had killed 2 members of the gang, and she told him that they had killed his wife. As for his young son, he is in intensive care between life and death. He quickly got out of bed and went to his son and started crying because he couldn't protect him and his mother. He felt guilty about what happened, and from the moment he kissed his son's hand, he changed and became a different person. He escaped from the hospital and went to the bank to withdraw all his savings, then called his colleague to inquire about the number Billy called from. He knew that it was a number for a bar called the Four Roses. He went to the bar to look for Billy, but the worker acted as if he did not speak English, but he was so angry that he broke the whole place, in addition to hitting the people present, until one of them told him that Billy was with a person named Hiko in a nearby apartment. Before leaving, he asked the worker about a place to buy weapons. Unfortunately for him, the worker sent him to Billy's father's shop. After he chose the weapons and paid for them, Billy's father stopped him before he left because he knew that Nick bought the gun to kill his son, but Nick was surprised when he left him and told him that he would finally get rid of his son. He learned how to use a weapon. Before he reached Hiko's apartment, he stood in front of the door, and before he knocked, he remembered that he was no longer Nick and opened the door in his own way. He shot the hole in the door and entered, but he found only Hiko, and after hitting him, he told him that Billy was in an abandoned hospital and gave him the address, but before he left, he forced Hiko to call Billy and tell him that Nick had sentenced him to death, and this was Nick's response on the box Billy had sent threatening his family. Billy realizes that Nick is bent on revenge, and before he hangs up he hears the sound of a shot that Nick fired at Hiko. Billy took everything that belonged to him and decided to run away, but before he ran away he met his father, who told him that he loved him and that he must run away quickly before the man from whom he bought the weapons found him. But because Billy had a heart without mercy, he killed his father and took his car and ran away with it. Nick arrives at the abandoned hospital and kills everyone, as promised by Billy, who arrives to join his colleagues to kill Nick. Nick hid in the dark and killed the gang members one by one, until he entered an open room, and Billy entered behind him. The two started shooting at each other until they were hit, so they sat dying in one chair after they ran out of ammunition. But Nick had bought another third gun, pulled it out, and killed Billy. He returned home after getting rid of the entire gang, and when the police arrived, they were surprised that he did not resist them. Rather, he remained sitting watching the TV when the investigator told him that his little son had begun to move. In the end, he preferred to die at home while watching a videotape of his family. Here the movie ends. Thank you for watching.